Everybody. Before we start, a couple of announcements. First, if everyone can please silence their cell phones. Thank you. And also, we're going to have a Q&A after the presentation. We just ask that you please use this microphone, even if you have a loud voice, because we have folks filming from the city today, and so just to pick up your voice on the camera. So even if you have a loud voice, we just ask that you speak into this. And just raise your hand, and I'll come over to you. All right. Without further ado, take it away, Bob.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks. My name's Bob Myers. I'm Director of History Programming for the Historical Society of Michigan. And some of you, I know, picked up some of our copies of Michigan History Magazine. That's probably how people know us best, is because we publish Michigan History Magazine. A lot of people confuse us with the State Museum, Library, Archives. That's not us. We're a non-governmental organization. The State Museum, Library, Archives are wonderful people. They're our good friends. We send them Christmas cards and gifts, but that's not us. We're not part of that operation. So just kind of making sure that we're aware. So anyway, program tonight is about the Michigan and the RMS Titanic. Unquestionably the most famous shipwreck in history. How many of you have heard of the Titanic? Oh, look at that. Everybody has. Oh my goodness, yes. All right, true confession time. How many of you have seen the James Cameron movie with Kate Winslet and Leonardo? Okay, yeah. How about the older one back in the 50s, Titanic, which is really a more accurate movie if you're looking at the story of the disaster. So I'm going to kind of assume that, yeah, you guys are a pretty educated bunch and you kind of know that the boat sank. So we're going to gloss a little bit of that and maybe go into some things that are a little lesser known, and of course the Michigan ties with the Titanic. Yeah, Titanic it's a part of the world's cultural history, the most famous shipwreck in history. Books, movies, musicals, where, as I said, we know the movie Titanic, the more recent James Cameron version, fictional novels like Raise the Titanic, Michigan author Win Craig Wade's Titanic, End of a Dream, the musical, The Unsinkable Molly Brown. There's a newer musical, Titanic. I've never seen it, don't know the quality, but it's there. So yeah, here it is, one ship that lived for only a few days and went down, and here it is well over a century later, a part of the world's cultural history, unlike any other shipwreck in the world. Well, the Titanic was born here in this room, at Harland and Wolff, Belfast, Northern Ireland. This is the drawing room, and the ship in the background, the picture is either Titanic possibly, or Olympic, which was a sister ship, or the one that became Britannic. There were 3 Olympic-class steamers that were going to be built. Olympic the first, Titanic second, and then Britannic. Designed by Thomas Andrews and William Peary. They designed all 3 ships. And when White Star contracted with Harland and Wolff to build them, they told these guys, we will have you build them on a cost-plus basis. So in other words, build the best ship you can, and we'll pay you whatever it is, plus the profits, or your profit margin. And so the best quality could go into them. Now, White Star wanted liners, as they were planning these ships out, and ocean liners are getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time in the early 20th century. And remember, this is a time of enormous technological progress. Now we think the world's changing today. It's changing faster back then. You think about it, turn of the 20th century, you have the automobile, the airplane, electric lights, the telephone, the phonograph. Think of that. You could hold on to sound and play it back. And all of these things are changing the world very fast in ways that affected people's everyday lives. And people believed at that time, and this kind of comes into play with Titanic, that technology is going to transform the world in such a way that all of our problems are going to be gone. Okay. It didn't quite work out that way, but that was really the belief at the time, because the world is changing fast. So White Star is building all these shipping companies, transatlantic shipping companies, are building bigger and bigger vessels. Now, the arch rival of White Star is Cunard, the other English company. There are other, transatlantic companies, German North America Line and so forth. But Cunard and White Star are battling it out for the English, the trade coming to America from England. And the Cunarders, now I said White Star is going to compete in luxury. The Cunarders are certainly no slouch. These are luxurious vessels, like the Lusitania and the Mauretania. Those are the fastest ones on the North Atlantic trade, 25, 26 knots crossing the Atlantic. So White Star decides, we're not going to compete with them on the basis of speed. We're going to compete on the basis of luxury. Luxury. Now, these are not garbage scows being run by Cunard, by no means. If you look at the pictures here of the Veranda Cafe on the Lusitania or the Passengers Lounge, these are luxurious vessels. Oh, and you might notice that the Cunarders, by convention, the ships always ended in IA. Lusitania, Mauretania, Aquitania, and so forth. The White Star had their ships ending in IC, Britannic, Olympic, Titanic. And in fact, I think there's pretty good evidence that the third ship in the line, which became Britannic, was actually going to be gigantic. And it kind of works with these heroic figures of the mythology, the Titans, the giants, the Olympians. It kind of works with that. But when Titanic went down, then it seemed a bit of hubris, and so gigantic became Britannic. And a bit of trivia for you too. The Cunarders, ending in IA, they had a new ship in the works that was going to be named the Victoria, IA. And then the king came to see the ship, and they toured him around, and the queen was Queen Mary, and the king asked, well, who will this new ship be named for? And White Star said, Your Majesty, it will be named for the greatest queen England has ever had. And he said, oh, Her Majesty will be so pleased. So they had to change it to Queen Mary, not Victoria. Anyway, now, White Star. White Star was not White Star. That was not the official name of the company. It was officially the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company, and it was an American company. It was American-owned, which most people didn't know. In fact, most of the people in England didn't know that. It was owned by J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine. And so it was kind of a wholly owned subsidiary. Now the crew was still from Great Britain, from the British Isles, but the ownership actually was American by the great robber baron J.P. Morgan. Now, when White Star contracted for these new ships, they were going to be so big, so immense, that Harland and Wolff did not even have slipways big enough to put them in, to build them in. And so they had to take 3 slipways and combine them into 2 for these 2 huge new ships. And they grew up next to each other. Titanic there on the left, Olympic, as I mentioned earlier, was the first in the series, the Olympic-class steamers, Olympic-class liners. And here they are, Olympic nearing completion, the hull nearing completion. You can see Olympic there on the right, Titanic taking form there on the left. And then Olympic went into service immediately, which was the convention. Time's a wasting. let's get that ship in service. We put a lot of money into it. We're not going to have any time to get acquainted with the ship. We need to get it on the ocean immediately. And so they did with Olympic. You can see here in the gantry there, the Olympic is already gone. Titanic now being ready for launch on May 31st, 1911. Employed thousands of workers in Belfast to build these ships. Every kind of trade you can imagine. And here's Titanic now during her fitting out. The fitting out, they would launch the hull, basically an empty hull, get it into the water, and then giant cranes like that when you see there are used to lower in the engines and the boilers and all of that sort of thing. That's the fitting out process. You might notice there are 3 funnels there. The fourth one, the one in the furthest aft, was a dummy. And if you watch the James Cameron movie, they have some of these views of the ship steaming along and kind of an aerial view. It's CGI. Sorry to break it to you, it's not really there. But they did get it right. There's no smoke coming out of that 4th funnel. So why 4 funnels instead of 3? Well, the Cunarders had 4, and you got to follow suit, and the designers felt it looked better. So they did run some steam piping and stuff up it, but it was not connected to the furnaces. So here's Titanic now nearing completion, early 1912, 882.5 feet long, almost the length of 3 football fields, 90-foot beam, over 46,000 gross tons. A hair larger than Olympic. They were sister ships, but there were a few differences, minor differences. When Titanic was built, launched, and put into service, she was the largest man-made moving object in the world, the largest ocean liner in the world. Had Titanic survived, she would have held that title for about 1 year. These ships were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, if you were traveling Titanic, this is actually Olympic, but they were almost identical, but the grand staircase, this is what you would have in first class. Again, you watch the James Cameron movie, and Rose's character, her family, they're traveling in first class. And this is what you would have had. Now, this is a first-class cabin. Cost you about 30 pounds or roughly $3,000 in today's money to travel in a first-class cabin. Now, if you had a second class, you could also travel second class. First class is up nearest the boat deck, up toward the top of the ship. You could travel in second class. That would be about $1,200 in today's money. So a lot of people traveling second class. And then you could travel in what had formerly been called steerage, because you're down near at the bottom of the ship, bottom of the hull, near the steering gear. On Titanic and many of these liners, now that becomes third class. Sounds better. And that would run you, depending on where you were, $300 to $800 roughly in today's money. So still expensive, but it was affordable for immigrants could make the journey. And obviously it's not luxurious. You have kind of bunks there, but you have wash facilities there. That's not a toilet. That's a sink in the room, and very substantial meals, not 5-star restaurant class like you had up in first class, but still very nutritious, filling meals, probably at least as good as what you would get at home. Now, on that first voyage, of course, famously, we have some of the richest people in the world. John Jacob Astor IV. He's 47 years old. He'd been married before, unhappy marriage, divorced, and this is his 18-year-old bride. Yes, it was a bit of a scandal, but 47 and 18 years old, but they're honeymooning, coming back to America. Businessman Benjamin Guggenheim. He was married, but not to her, to Leontine Aubert, age 24. And many other people. Archie Butt, who was a military aide to both Presidents Roosevelt and Taft. Taft is in the White House right now. The Strausses from Macy's, Isadora and Ida Strauss, Macy's department store in New York City, traveling first class on Titanic. And there is a chasm, a vast chasm, between first class and third class. So how many of you watched Downton Abbey on PBS? Oh, if you haven't, you should. It's a soap opera, but it's a good soap opera. All right, well, if you watch Downton Abbey, you have the Crawley family who live in this great abbey manor, a great manor house, and they live in the upper floors. If you're the servants, you are down in the basement. You know, a lot of the servants are the cooking, the people, the cooks and so forth. And you don't go up. On Titanic, it's the same way. If you're in steerage, you do not go up to the boat deck. That's for first class. You do not belong there. You get in trouble if you go up there. So you are banned from those upper decks. That's one of the flaws in the James Cameron. I know he had to have Jack meet Rose, but he wouldn't have been allowed up there. He would not at all. Now, also with making that first voyage, J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of White Star, he's going along not necessarily because he wants to go to America, but this is their newest ship, and he wants to see what it's like. And also Thomas Andrews, a designer with the Guarantee Group from Harland and Wolff. He makes that first voyage. The Guarantee Group, I think it was about 30 men, and they're from Harland and Wolff. And what they're doing is going along to see how does this new ship operate. Remember, they've got another one ready to go. Britannic is going to be built, and there's still time to make changes, improvements. They made some improvements from Olympic to Titanic. They're going to make improvements, and they want to see what they can do. Now, from Michigan, I promised you we'd get to Michigan. Dick and Helen Bishop of Dowagiac. Dick Bishop, young man, I think he was about 23, but his first wife had died in childbirth. Her family owned the Round Oak Stove Company. Ever hear of that? Well, if you lived in the early 20th century, you would have. You'd have a round oak stove probably in your home, or two of them. This was one of the biggest stove manufacturers in the country. His wife died in childbirth, and guess where the fortune went? To her husband. And so he inherited a vast fortune, and his wife, Helen, her father owned a big chair manufacturing operation in Sturgis. Well, Dick was widowed. They met very quickly, fell in love, got married, and they go on a honeymoon cruise. So they're traveling up there in first class with people like Isadora and Ida Strauss. Now, also people in Michigan traveling in second class, like the Becker family. They were missionaries in India. Ruth Becker was 12 years old. Her mother, Nellie, two siblings, and their father and a baby were coming, or a toddler, were coming to America. They get to England from India, and the toddler fell ill. So Ruth's father said, Nellie, take the rest of the children to America on Titanic. I'll come later. I'll stay behind with the toddler, which probably saved his life. So he sends them on ahead. Lots of immigrants down in third class coming to America, like the Skoog family. They're going from Sweden to Iron Mountain. Well, they're miners. You know, lots of iron ore up there, copper ore. There's a lot of miners. And we think, well, these are immigrants. They're coming to America. They come to America and they never go back. Nonsense. The Atlantic ran two ways. And people like the Skoogs, they're from Sweden. Yeah, they come over to America, they immigrate, but they want to go back and see the old country, see the family, and that's what they've done. And bringing with them a couple of relatives. So the whole family now coming back over to America, bound for Iron Mountain, Michigan. Maud Sincock from Cornwall. Her father was a miner up in Houghton in the copper mines. Ida Anderson, she's actually going to Manistee. Many people are going also to the Lower Peninsula, but her sister is over in Manistee. coming over to see her sister, Frank Andrew, also from Cornwall, going to Houghton. Why Houghton? Copper ore. And why Cornwall? There are tin mines and copper mines in Cornwall. And these guys know mining. They can come to America. You walk into Houghton, Hancock up there, Iron Mountain, you got a job. And they know that. So they're coming over for mining. Stephen Jenkin, another miner, going up to Hancock. He's gone over for a visit and coming back in second class. Not all of them are traveling in steerage. Now, a lot of people also bound for Detroit. What's going on in Detroit in the early 20th century? Auto industry is booming. Yeah, the auto industry is really taking off. And a machinist like Frank Goldsmith, he knows he can get a job in Detroit. Easy to get a job there. And so he's coming over with his wife and his son. All in all, about 70 people from Michigan. Either from Michigan, coming back from a visit, whatever, some immigrating to America, bound for Michigan, but about 70 of them on board Titanic. Crew gets put together very quickly. This is April 1912 now, and we think, well, the Titanic had its crew. Well, it did, but it wasn't a crew united. These were people drawn from all over and put aboard Titanic, no time to get acquainted with the ship. E.J. Smith, a veteran, had taken Olympic over on her maiden voyage. Now he's going to take Titanic across on hers. Now, so she leaves Belfast for sea trials April 2nd, 1912. And the sea trials are basically taking the ship out with a crew, running it around in Belfast Harbor, and seeing how the ship handles. And the next day, in service. So there's no time for the crew to learn to get to know each other and develop that kind of relationship you do when you work together. There's no time for that. And they don't know the ship. In fact, some of the officers had never been on the North Atlantic. They were used to the Mediterranean. So they didn't know it at all. So they arrive in Southampton, England from Belfast the next day. They board 922 passengers. And then they go across to Cherbourg, France, take on more passengers. Of course, a few get off. So they kind of eliminate this in a lot of the movies, that Titanic did not sail directly from England to America. It goes over to Cherbourg, France first. And then to Cole, what's now Cole, was then Queenstown at the southern tip of Ireland, and that is her last stop there. There's a wonderful series of photographs of Titanic that were taken by a Catholic priest. He had just graduated from seminary. And he brought a camera along with him. His uncle was a Monsignor and gave him a ticket on the Titanic to travel from France over to Ireland. And the rest of the passengers a lot of the passengers in first class befriended him, and they apparently offered him a free ticket to America. Come with us. And he cabled his uncle, the Monsignor from Ireland, can I go? Can I go? And his uncle said, get off the ship. You got work to do. No lollygagging. But he did take a lot of photographs. They were discovered about 30 years ago, and the only photographs really we have of the living ship. So on board, about 2,223 passengers and crew, by no means full. She had capacity for many, many more. And this is the last photograph taken of Titanic now on April 11, 1912. She's weighed anchor, gathering speed, heading out from the southern tip of Ireland and for New York City. Well, famously, Titanic's wireless operators received many ice warnings, this one from the Caronia. They were traveling across the North Atlantic and heading into a field of ice. And these wireless operators, like this one, the cable, if you can read it here, it's addressed to Captain Titanic. Westbound steamers report bergs, icebergs, growlers, which are small bergs, and field ice. and giving the latitude and longitude. So these cables are taken from the wireless room and then posted in the chart room for the officers to see. Now, Titanic had the most modern and most powerful wireless set available at the time from Marconi, and they had two wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. So they were able to man the wireless system, the radio, around the clock. But their job, they are not Titanic crew. They work for Marconi. Their job is not to take ice warnings like this or things, that sort of navigation hazard warnings. Their job is passenger telegrams. Lots of passengers want to send telegrams to New York saying, "Hi, how are you? Having a great time. Wish you were here." And that's what pays the bills for Marconi. So that's their priority. Well, there's an idea that, or a concept sort of, that Titanic is sailing across the North Atlantic and out of nowhere there's an iceberg. Not at all. She's sailing right into an ice field. Also an idea that Captain Smith did nothing. He didn't. He diverted farther south to avoid the ice field, but in fact it took him right into it. And so it's a whole field of ice, kind of a long ribbon of ice coming down, running north-south. And if you'd been out on Titanic that night, this is kind of what you would have seen. The white line on the horizon there is not mist, that's ice out there. That's that field ice they're talking about. And you can see icebergs off in the distance. So this is what they're running into that night. Not at full speed. Titanic never attained its full speed, but they were going faster than they had, or as fast as they had ever gone directly into an ice field. They did not slacken speed. Well, about 11:30, April 14, 1912, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee are the lookouts up in the crow's nest mast up ahead on the deck of the Titanic, way up in the air. Captain Smith, despite the ice warnings, did not post any extra lookouts that night. It was often the case where a captain would post lookouts in what was called the eyes of the ship, down at the bow, so you'd just have extra eyes out there. He did not. But Frederick Fleet, they're looking out, and remember, it's bitter cold, it's about 30 degrees, and you've got about a 20-knot wind hitting you in the face. So there's that human factor to figure in too. But they look out, and Frederick Fleet grabs, there's a telephone down to the bridge. He rings it. William Murdoch picks up at the bridge, first officer. He says, "What do you see?" And Frederick Fleet says, "Iceberg right ahead." Well, William Murdoch did kind of what we would do. He ordered hard a starboard. Swing the ship out away from it. He may have ordered full astern. Titanic experts, and I'm not one of them, disagree on that. So he may have tried to slam on the brakes too, but we do know that he ordered hard a starboard. And what he's doing is trying to, what they called port around the iceberg. So he's making a left turn to try to swing the bow away from the iceberg, and then when the bow clears, he's going to order hard a port and swing the stern around the berg. Now, you might think, wait a minute, this is hard a starboard and the bow is turning to port? Well, that's a command we don't use anymore. It went out of fashion in the 1920s, 30s, but imagine, if you can imagine, if you will, a rowboat with a hand tiller. Okay, and the tiller is attached to the rudder. So if you turn the handle to starboard, to the right, the rudder turns to the left and the bow would swing to the left. So that's what he's doing. He's going to port around the iceberg, turn to the left, and then swing the bow out, but he did not have enough time. And Titanic hit the iceberg just a glancing blow on the starboard quarter. And it opened up slits in the hull. There was no 300-foot-long gash. It was just popping rivets, buckling plates. It opened up an area to the ocean about 3 meters square, about the size of that door. That was it. But that was enough. Titanic was brilliantly designed. She had watertight compartments. These watertight doors could be lowered. They could lower electrically, or they would lower automatically by floats. And William Murdoch immediately ordered the watertight doors closed. And there were a series of watertight compartments. You can see kind of these vertical walls going up through the hull. And so Titanic was designed that any four watertight, if four watertight compartments were breached, it would still float. If any two compartments adjacent to each other were breached, she would still float. And that's kind of the worst case scenario, is that another ship would basically, what we would call in automobiles, T-boning it. A collision that would, by bad luck, happen right on a bulkhead. And it would open up two adjacent compartments to the sea, and Titanic would still float. But she would not float with five. And it opened up five. So as Titanic sank by the bow, the water would simply fill up those forward compartments, and then it would go over the top of each one consecutively until finally the ship would sink. Well, Captain E.J. Smith has the enormous fortune to have on board the Guarantee Group. Thomas Andrews, the designer who knows his ship better than anyone else, is on board. And so Smith he'd gone to bed. He hadn't gone to sleep yet, but he comes to the bridge immediately. And William Murdoch, first officer who had the watch, tells him what's happened. And Smith orders the carpenter to sound the ship. And Thomas Andrews goes with him. They come back up to the bridge about midnight. And the Titanic by this time has stopped and is dead in the water. And Thomas Andrews tells Smith the ship will sink. And Smith simply froze. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this kind of scenario. And I don't think any of us know what we're going to do in that situation until it happens. And Smith really issued no effective set of orders to his officers. And that was one of the reasons for the great loss of life, was they were captainless, I think. Now, he did go to the wireless room, which is right behind the bridge, and he told Jack Phillips was the first wireless operator, was on duty at that moment. Harold Bride got up then and helped him, but he tells Jack Phillips, send the CQD. And the CQD was the distress call. It's being changed over to SOS. But at that time, a lot of the wireless operators are still used to using CQD, or would know of that. It doesn't really stand for anything. CQ is sort of, here's a message for everyone. Distress would be for distress. SOS, by the way, doesn't stand for anything either. It doesn't mean save our ship. But it's easy to hear, because they're not talking verbally, they're sending Morse code. So SOS is ... ... Pretty easy to distinguish. And actually, Harold Bride, joking to Jack Phillips, said, why don't you try the SOS? It's the new one, that new call, and maybe your only chance to send it. And it was. So they alternate with SOS CQD. And here's an example, one that was picked up by the liner Burma. And if you can read the writing, CQD SOS from MGY. That's Titanic's radio call sign. We have struck icebergs sinking fast, come to our assistance, and giving the latitude and longitude. So many ships on the North Atlantic pick it up, including Olympic picked it up, but she was 500 miles away. But on board the Carpathia, about 50 miles to the southeast, the captain, Arthur Rostron, reacts immediately. And if you want to study a disaster and a reaction of someone in a leadership position to a disaster, study Captain Arthur Henry Rostron. It's amazing. And here he is. This is with the unsinkable Molly Brown, who is traveling in first class, and Arthur Rostron presenting him with a loving cup in gratitude. But Rostron calls his officers together. Well, the first thing he does, the wireless operator comes to the bridge. He says, "We've got a distress call from the Titanic that they're sinking." And Rostron says, "Is this? Are you sure? Check it out." But he has the ship turned around immediately. And the wireless operator comes back a minute or two later, and he says, "Yes, this is on the level. Titanic is in distress. Here's the coordinates." He calls his officers together, and he gives them orders. And he says, "All right, I want everything we've got in the furnaces. Fire them up. All the steam we can get. I want you to even turn off the hot water to the cabins so that every ounce of heat we've got is going into the engines, into the steam. I want the lifeboats cleared away. Get them ready to launch. I want hot food, wake up the galley. I want hot food and drink for survivors so that these people have food. They've got hot coffee, hot tea. I want that ready. I want ash buckets ready on ropes." Why ash buckets? Because you can drop them over the side and bring up infants. I want doctors. Find out who the doctors are on board, what languages they speak. Position them in different parts of the ship because we're going to have immigrants that don't necessarily speak English. So I want this done, this done, this done. He later admitted that he also had chairs with ropes prepared in case passengers were crazed and they needed to tie them down. He didn't admit that right away. But he issues all of these orders to his officers. "I want you to do this, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, and when you have done it, I want you to come back to me and report that you have done it so that I know it's being done. Open up the gangway doors on the side of the ship. I want those open, I want them ready, so that we can bring people in on the side." All of these orders. Whereas Smith did not even tell his officers that the ship was sinking. Many of them didn't know. Well, Jack Phillips stays at his post even after Captain Smith dismissed him. He and Bride stayed there until the water was literally lapping at the door, keeping the messages going. Now, Titanic famously did not have enough lifeboats for everyone. They had more than regulations required, but not enough for everyone. And Smith knew that. The lifeboats had a capacity of 65 passengers per lifeboat. Dick and Helen Bishop, well, they're up in first class. They're on the first boat launched. They're some of the first people to get into a lifeboat. And lifeboat number 7, and it is launched with 23 passengers and 3 crewmen. Now, why are they not filling the lifeboats? Well, the officers don't know that the ship is sinking. You've stopped in the middle of the North Atlantic. It's pitch black out there. Do you really want to put rich people like Dick and Helen Bishop into a lifeboat when you're just going to maybe lower them down and then bring them back up? Maybe somebody's going to slip and fall over and die, and you're going to be responsible for that. Maybe just wait a while. So many of them don't know that the ship is doomed, that the ship is going to sink. This is the responsibility of Captain Smith. Get your officers together. For God's sake, don't tell the passengers that the ship is sinking. We don't want to start a panic, but it is. Fill those lifeboats. How many will they hold? 65. It's written right on the lifeboat, stenciled right on there, 65 capacity. Well, if you're an officer loading those boats, is that 65 lowering capacity or 65 in the water? Maybe it'll buckle in the middle. No, it's lowering capacity too. Tell them, fill the lifeboats. When you've got 65 in there, put some infants. They can sit on people's laps. The boats will take the weight. He doesn't tell them that. Ruth Becker and her family. They're in second class, but as people are now gathering on the boat deck, at first there were few people up there because you're not supposed to be there. But Ruth Becker and her family get to the boat deck. As she got separated from her mother screamed at her, "Ruth, get into another boat," and she did. That was launched with 49 passengers and crew. Now, it was an unusual circumstance because Titanic sank on sank slowly and on virtually an even keel. The ocean that night was a flat calm. People said it was like a mill pond, not even a ripple on the water. One of the reasons the lookouts didn't spot the iceberg. They didn't spot icebergs typically by seeing the berg itself. They would see the spray hitting the base of the berg, the white foam coming up. But it was a flat calm, no wind, and no spray. Water about 28 degrees. Remember, it's salt water, so it has a lower freezing point than fresh water. So this is taken from Carpathia, 26 passengers and crew in a boat with a capacity of 65. The people going into the water had just a couple of minutes before they couldn't swim. They most probably didn't drown, they froze to death in the water. Others probably died of heart attacks hitting that cold, cold water. So Carpathia returns to New York City with 710 survivors. And the loss of life hits primarily second class and third class. Only 3 women from first class were lost. You know, they get to the boat deck right away. People are looking after them. There are stewards there. No Captain Smith to tell the stewards, bring those people up to the boat deck. They weren't locked down there. That's inaccurate in the movie. But they weren't supposed to be there. There's no stewards to tell them, get up to the boat deck. No, you won't get in trouble. And so many of them are left down there until it's too late, until there are no lifeboats left. One of the women that was, the women in first class that were lost refused to get into lifeboats. Ida Strauss, her husband Isidore tried to get her to get into a lifeboat. He refused. He said he would not board a lifeboat when there were women and children to be saved. He tried to get Ida to go into a lifeboat. She told him no. They were both up in years. She told him, no, we have been together for many years, and where you go, I will go. And she was lost with the ship. But you can see, third class, overwhelming number of passengers from third class are lost. Again, they're not fenced off from the boat deck, but the fence was not literal. It was still there. It was just the custom, the class system of the time. Now, in Washington, D.C., Senator William Alden Smith of Michigan. He's from Grand Rapids. He was born in Dowagiac. The family moved to Grand Rapids when he was a boy, 12 years old. The family was poor. His father was physically unable to work. He and his brother sold popcorn on the streets. But a real Horatio Alger story. He kind of rises in society. He gets to be a page in Congress, and then runs for office. He serves as game warden up at Sault Ste. Marie, and then he runs for the House, runs for the Senate, and now he's one of our 2 senators from Michigan. And he is getting cables from constituents whose families were from Michigan who were on the Titanic and what has happened to them. And there are rumors Captain Smith was drunk. Why? We've heard J. Bruce Ismay survived. The managing director of the company survived when my family was lost. We can't even get word from White Star. They're not answering. The Carpathia is not answering telegrams. What is happening? Even President Taft, his military aide, Archie Butt, is apparently lost, but the president's telegrams go unanswered. What is going on? Smith, he's a progressive Republican senator, kind of in the mode of Teddy Roosevelt, and he wants some answers. And he makes inquiries. What is going to be done? The Carpathia is going to come to New York City, discharge the passengers, and then return to England. People like J. Bruce Ismay, the surviving officers, are we going to be able to question them? You know, was Captain Smith drunk? Were they trying to beat a speed record? You know, sailing recklessly, trying to beat a speed record. And the answer that Smith says to what is going to be done is not much. Carpathia will dock, discharge the passengers, the survivors, and return to England, where they cannot be subpoenaed. Well, that does not sit well with Senator William Alden Smith of Michigan. And it so happened that a friend of his, Joe Bayless from Sault Ste. Marie, he was a sheriff up there, and he knew Joe Bayless from when he was a game warden up at the Sioux. Joe Bayless stops by his office, and Joe, what are you doing here? And Joe Bayless said, well, I'm here in Washington, D.C. on business. Well, where are you going now? Well, going back up to the Sioux. And Smith says, no, you're not. I'm deputizing you. And when Carpathia docks in New York City, I want you to slap a subpoena on everybody you can find. And that's what Joe Bayless did. Bayless Library up at the Sioux is named for his family, by the way. And Smith wants answers. Was J. Bruce Ismay was he pressuring Captain Smith to beat a speed record? Were the third-class passengers kept from the boat deck? Why weren't there enough lifeboats? What about the ice warnings? We've heard about ice warnings being telegraphed to the Titanic. What about those? What about these messages, like even from President Taft, being ignored? He wants some answers. And so they subpoena the crew, they get passengers, they subpoena J. Bruce Ismay, and on April 19, this is 4 days after Titanic went down, Smith opens an inquiry in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, site of the present-day Empire State Building. So 4 days later, he's starting an inquiry. And he gets answers. Now, the British press parody Smith. He asked a lot of stupid questions, like is 48 degrees Fahrenheit above zero? Of what are icebergs made? And the answer was ice, I suppose, sir. Although Smith had learned that that wasn't really true. Yes, icebergs were made of ice, but they also had a lot of dirt and rock in them. Yeah. And the inquiry, the transcript, exact transcript is available online. Smith asks almost all the questions. And it's fascinating reading because he just wears the witnesses down. He questions and questions and questions. They're not lying. And they're not really trying to conceal information, but they're also not necessarily being entirely forthcoming. And the quick, I'm asking a question, okay, I got it answered, on to the next question. That's not Smith's style. He's a lawyer, and he knows keep asking. And he just wears the witnesses down. The American press kind of liked him. This is him using a corkscrew to get information out of the British. And he gets answers. Now, in the middle of the inquiry, there's a bombshell. Crewmen from the Californian let him know that they watched Titanic sink, and their captain did nothing. Californian was stopped for the night, small liner, she was stopped for the night, about 11 miles north of Titanic. And they watched a big liner come up and then stop and begin to send up white rockets. They woke up the captain of the Californian, Stanley Lord, and he asked, what color are the rockets? And they said, white. He said, well, have you tried to signal her? Yes, we have. We used a signal lamp, but didn't get a reply. He said, well, keep signaling. The Californian had a wireless operator, but she only had one, and he had gone to bed just a few minutes before midnight. And they watched Titanic. The lights kind of looked odd, and then she disappeared. They thought steaming away. So now there's a new dynamic. Did this captain simply watch Titanic sink and refuse to come to her aid? Wow. And Californian did receive word that morning that Titanic had gone down. This is her from the Carpathia. She arrived just as the last of the passengers, the survivors, were boarded aboard Carpathia. They looked around for any more survivors, but of course by that time there were none, and then continued on their way. And this is to give you an idea, this is the probable positions. Titanic there toward the center. Her position was actually about 10, 11 miles east of her reported position. Carpathia about 50 miles to the southeast, and California at probably about 11 miles to the north. The British Board of Trade conducted its own inquiry after the U.S. inquiry, came to about the same conclusions. So, what did Smith find? Well, he found that J. Bruce Ismay did not try to pressure Captain Smith to beat a speed record. They couldn't. They weren't as fast as the Cunarders. No matter what they did, they weren't going to beat the Cunarders across the Atlantic and set a speed record. But they were traveling faster than they had ever gone before into a known ice field. No extra lookouts posted. The third-class passengers were not kept from the boat deck. There were no locked gates there. They were not forbidden to go up there. But nobody took any effort to get them up there, to show them the way. Many of them are immigrants that don't speak English. They're trapped down there. They don't know how to get up there. Titanic actually carried more lifeboats than the regulations required, but the regulations were outmoded. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone. The wireless operators weren't exactly ignoring the messages coming from America. They were overwhelmed. Jack Phillips had gone down with the ship. Harold Bride helped out as best he could. His feet were badly frostbitten. But there's really no law that says you have to give precedence to safety warnings. You know, passenger telegrams are more important. And there's nothing that says you can't sell your story to the papers when you get to New York, which Harold Bride did. They unfairly, I think, both excoriated Stanley Lord, captain of the Californian. Both inquiries said that he could have saved all or nearly all of the passengers had he reacted immediately. That's nonsense. Had he immediately woken up the wireless operator and gone to Titanic's aid, best possible scenario is that he would have arrived shortly after Titanic had gone down. He would have saved a few passengers probably and crew, but not many. Those people were doomed. They were not going to live in that freezing water. Well, what of the Michigan passengers? Dick and Helen Bishop survive, but Helen was badly injured in an automobile accident. Her skull was broken. They had to put a metal plate in her head, and they divorced 2 years later, and she died soon afterward. A tragic story, tragic story. She was pregnant at the time, and they lost the baby then that fall. The baby was born, but stillborn. Ruth Becker and her family survived. She became a school teacher in Benton Harbor, lived there the rest of her life. She said that her mother was never the same after that. Maud Sincock lived to a ripe old age. Died in 1979, living up in Houghton. But most of them, majority, did not survive. Ida Anderson from Sweden was lost at sea. Her body never recovered. Frank Andrew from Cornwall. Many of the bodies were not recovered. If they were, many were buried at sea. First-class passengers, their bodies were typically brought back because, at least ostensibly, they had estates to settle, and you needed to be able to prove that they were dead. Third-class passengers, most of those were buried at sea. The Skoog family, all of them lost. Not a single survivor from that family. Stephen Jenkin, also lost. Emily and Frank Goldsmith survived. The father stayed on Titanic, went down with the ship. They lived for a short time outside Detroit. And Frank Jr., not Jr., he had a different middle name, but the boy, Frank, said that they lived not too far from Tiger Stadium. And he said the first time when they lived there, someone hit a home run. And the screams from the crowd. He was right back in the North Atlantic. Yeah. So 27 survived, 43 were lost with the ship. 15 of the survivors, first class or second class. That's where your odds were best. So out of this comes the radioactive. Sometimes we say, well, so what? The boat sank, get over it. Well, there is a so what. A lot of legislation that affects us today comes out of that. The radioactive 1912. From now on, every ship is going to have around-the-clock wireless operators. And those warnings, navigation warnings, those take precedence over passenger telegrams. Radioactive 1912. 24-hour staffing. This is Jack Phillips at the Titanic's wireless station. International Ice Patrol. That continues to this very day. Back in the day, they did it with ships. They went out searching for icebergs and ice fields. Today, it's done with airplanes. But 112 years later, we still have the International Ice Patrol. Lifeboats for all legislation. After Titanic, every ship would have enough lifeboats for everyone. That may have been a mistake. Now, that sounds kind of crazy. But how many of you have heard of the Empress of Ireland? 1, 2, 3, yeah. Almost unknown, but 2 years later, rammed in near the mouth of the St. Lawrence River by a Norwegian freighter, and she went down in just a few minutes. Over 1,000 passengers and crew went down with it. Almost unknown. They had enough lifeboats for everybody, but no way to launch them. She went down at a list. Remember, Titanic sank on an even keel. This one went over on her side and went down. You couldn't launch you had all those lifeboats, but you couldn't launch them. How many, I bet everybody here has heard of the Lusitania. Torpedoed just off the coast of Ireland, went down in 18 minutes. Almost 1,200 people lost on the Lusitania. Enough lifeboats for everybody, but they were only able to launch, I forget how many it was, 3 or 4. Great book, Dead Wake, about the Lusitania disaster. But again, going down at a severe list, they're unable to launch the lifeboats. How many of you have heard of the Eastland? Just a couple, yeah. Probably the lifeboats for all legislation contributed to the sinking of this vessel. She was always a little bit top-heavy, and the lifeboats for all legislation came into effect, and the owners over in St. Joseph, Michigan, had to put extra lifeboats and launching gear up on the uppermost deck, making that already top-heavy ship even more top-heavy. And then the upper deck had rotted from moisture, and so the owners fixed that by pouring concrete on it. Yeah, they should have gone to jail. They should have gone to jail. She rolled over in the Chicago River. Took on 2,500 passengers. She just rolled over slowly onto her side. 884 people drowned right there at the dock. Just trapped like rats on it. So much they set up temporary morgues in Chicago. How many of you ever watched the Oprah Winfrey Show, Harpo Studio? Yeah, that was the building they used for the morgue. Yeah. So, what about William Alden Smith? Served in the Senate until 1919. Launched the career of Senator Arthur Vandenberg of Michigan, who would later help launch the career of a guy named Gerald Ford. Died in 1932. His son had been an aviator in World War I. He was not killed in action, but he died, and Smith was never the same afterward. He'd wanted to go into the law, retire from the Senate, go into law practice with his son, and it didn't happen. And he was just heartbroken. Well, famously, I'm going to try to wrap up here quickly. Robert Ballard and Woods Hole found the Titanic's grave in 1985. That was Seeking the Titanic grave, the wreckage of the Titanic, was actually a cover story for investigating these nuclear submarines Scorpion and Thresher. Remember, this is Cold War. The United States Navy was not keen on the Soviet Union knowing that they were going out and looking for these submarine wrecks. And so the story was put out that he was actually looking for Titanic. Once he did that, his deal with the Navy was, I'll find the submarines for you, survey those wrecks, and then you finance a few more days so that I can look for Titanic. And that's what they did. But I like to think of Titanic not as that wreck you see in the pictures or the James Cameron movie rusting on the bottom of the North Atlantic, but the living ship. You know, it had bad misfortune. Olympic went on to a long career, you know, a fine, reliable career. Titanic deserved that too. And I think it's a mistake to think of this marvelous piece of technology, this piece of luxury, as a wreck rotting on the bottom of the ocean. We ought to remember it as the living ship. You know, the shipwrecks they're one day in the life of a ship. Many ships have years of service, and I like the living ship better. So that's the program. I've kept you a long time, but if there's anything you'd like to know more about, or questions, comments, rebuttals, if I don't know the answer, I'll make it up. So go ahead. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, and we should ask for a microphone, please, so they can...
Do I have to press any buttons or anything here?
No, just talk right into it.
Okay. In 2012, at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, that was the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. And there, you know, they had an exhibit. They recreated the grand staircase. I even got a picture of myself standing on the staircase up there. You take a picture. They take a picture for you, and they give you the picture for a small sum. And they also, you know, had an iceberg you could actually touch it there. And so anyway, what happened is when I was there, they had, you know, stories about what happened to some of the people that, you know, were on the ship. The one that really intrigued me was the one lady up there. It might have been the lady that you just mentioned that had the plate in her skull. But anyway, what happened was she went to Egypt. She was probably well-to-do at the time. But anyway, she lived in the Detroit area. And what happened is the fortune teller told her, he says, you will survive a shipwreck, but you will not survive a car wreck. So she, you know, said, oh, fine, okay, and everything else like that. She boards the Titanic. She's one of the people that survived the Titanic up there. She returned to Detroit. Maybe about a year after that, she was driving her car up there, and what happened is, it was in the winter, and she slipped and ran into a tree and was killed instantly, and I was wondering if that was not the lady that you're talking about.
Yeah, that was actually Helen Bishop. She and her husband were coming back from a party of some kind, and they went off the road, and she was thrown out of the car, hit a tree, fractured her skull. She did live a couple of years after that, but long story short, it ultimately killed her. Yeah,
and then
they were from Dowagiac and traveling first class.
And then another thing too, there was a submersible that went over there a few years back out there. It went to see the Titanic. You had to pay something like, I don't know, an ungodly sum, $10,000 or something to go down there.
Yeah.
When they went down there, up there, something went wrong with the submersible and it imploded and killed everybody on board.
Yeah, that was last year, maybe, something like that. Yeah.
I don't know exactly what happened, but you would never have a chance if it implodes. That pressure is just too great at those depths.
The pressure is astronomical.
You're talking a ship
down
that's
there.
what, 4 or 5 miles down?
Yeah, it's so deep. Yeah. So, thank you. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Well, I'm going to put in just a quick plug for our organization, Historical Society of Michigan. We publish Michigan History Magazine, our members magazine Chronicle. We would love to have you as members and or subscribers. If you would like to subscribe or join, the subscription is $24.95, membership is $39.95, but if you go online and use BOB, all capitals, as a coupon code, you get $5 off. Why? It's because our staff says, Bob, anybody that listens to one of your programs deserves something. So you get $5 off from that. So go online and you can join online or subscribe online, and it'll ask you, do you have a coupon code, Bob, all capitals. It'll take $5 right off of that. We have a weekly lecture series called History Hounds, and that is, you register for that online. You can, if your library is a member organization or you're a member of a historical association that's a member organization, then you get free admission to that. You don't have to be a member of the Historical Society of Michigan. Marissa, the library here is not a member, sorry. But you could fix that. But we would love to have you, if you are a member of a member organization, you can pay $7 to hear a lecture, and we also have recorded ones on our website. And support the library.
Yeah, thank you.
Support your local library. We have organizations in our communities. You know, we have police and fire protection and streets and sewers and water and all that kind of thing. And that's critical for our communities. That's how we live here. Our libraries, museums, nature centers, theaters, parks, that's why we live in a community. So support your library. So thank you so much. Marissa, I'm going to turn them back over to you.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
All right, have a good evening, everyone.